to scooch in a second? I
Oh.
feel like I'm crowded.
Sure.
Thank you.
We're all set to go. This work session
Are we
is now
sharing this?
in
You may not
session.
have your, oh, there are some there.
It's something about cough drops that we have. So. Oh, here.
Whatever you want to give.
So what I thought we needed to cover are kind of walk through how I did the bill note. And here, if there are things you'd like to see different that I can accommodate. We're gonna talk about whether there are some other scenarios you wanted to look at, like zoning configuration, and then talk about the public presentation, what you want to focus on there. I gave you the draft report map that is really unattached, but I think that it'll just work better through tonight's meeting to have it next to it, and we'll go through the report. And just a paper that I was looking at for another reason that I thought might be interesting to you as you're thinking about growth in the community from the New Hampshire Center for Public Policy Studies. When I think about growth, what's within that growth is important to think about too. So we just start with the number that you're all going to be looking through the report to find as I'm talking. So we'll just get that over with. And it goes to page 6. We'll start with the results and then go back and talk about the steps to get there. So the top of page 6 really gives you the results that under your current zoning, using the methodology that we talked about, you have a potential 3,393 dwelling units constructed in the town compared with 1,009 that you have now. So a little more than a tripling of the,
So that's the maximum
Yeah,
build out
right,
that would be allowed.
right, under the current zoning. And just for comparison, I put Bartlett in because it's really similar to numbers to what Jackson would be when fully developed under the current zoning. So let's go back and talk about how I got there. As you know, the bill out analysis is an estimate of how much development under your current zoning based on a set of assumptions, and I've outlined those starting on page 2. I wrote the pieces that I used and a little where the data came from. And so obviously I took out surface water and road rights of way. Conserved land, you all gave me a list. Also some other sources that I had, and of course there was a lot of overlap. I got all of this from the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. I looked at what was on Granite in the past. And there was one that I picked up on from the notes in the assessors data, and I think that was how I kind of figured out which was conserved, and there were some different lot numbers in the different lists. Combination of all of those sources is shown in green on the map. Now, if somebody says, what do you think? If somebody says, well, you got that wrong, it's the piece next to it or something. That's really easy. That's an easy thing to tweak. So that's what I kept with using all those things together. I took out tax exempt land, which is primarily in the national forest, but some state and town-owned land as well. I should have asked when I started the project whether anyone was colorblind. I didn't put it in.
I'm gonna stay here, I'm sick, I just woke up from
Oh,
power,
God.
so I'm gonna stay right here.
didn't put any crossheads in or,
You're not alone, I'm afraid.
You're gonna need a copy though.
is there one more? I brought 10, is, you want 10?
We had to-
Well, might need to buy galvanized.
Great.
Yeah, that was 10.
Sorry.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, I know, I'm thinking we should all have masks.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm over here, Larry.
Well, you're not the only one. Half the table is sick.
Must have brought it down from Littleton.
Well, I got it. Okay, so, the blue is the public land.
I noticed there were a whole bunch of little lots that I guess we must have gotten through back taxes or something when we were going through it. Did you find did you find any, like a lot here, a lot there?
I don't see a lot of little.
Okay. When I was looking through the
Not a lot?
town, well, you might know off the top of your head.
Sorry.
Are there a lot of small lots that the town has repossessed or
I don't think we really repossess things. We try to avoid
Yeah, I
that at all
know.
costs, but I don't think we have a whole bunch of those.
All right, when I was looking through the book, I just thought I saw a few.
There might be a few, but.
Carol, I do think you've missed a lot, this conservation easement with the Spinoff group, up on Carter Notch Road, Holcomb Land. I'll try to check the site, but I think I see where Maloon Road is, and it's definitely above that, and it's definitely in Spinoff holding.
So if there's an additional one beyond what people gave me, that's easy to.
Okay. I'm surprised it's not listed as a town, it's been in conservation easement for 20 years or more. So I can't understand why it's not there, but I'll look for it.
Good.
Uh,
What is this one?
That's gotta be, it's below Maloon Road. I think it's a couple of people's land. It's not far from the Badger land, and is it Richard Anderson, and then the ski, what's that ski
Oh, yeah.
group? They have a big, I think that's what that is.
Holcomb is way up, yeah.
Yeah, that was up further.
Yeah, Holcomb is way up.
Exactly, and I think it doesn't show here, but it should. So I will check that and get that lot number and so on.
Yeah, I
The
think
second one
it's,
down.
yeah, I think it's way up here, Betsy. You
Yeah.
were talking by Anderson.
That's what we're talking, asking what this one is.
Oh,
Well, I think the green one down below Maloon Road has got to be Richard Anderson and that ski group that's across the way, Drifters. They have a fair amount of land that's in conservation easement, I believe. So I think that green may be a combination of those two.
Not the drifters are on the other side.
Well, they
They
are.
are
The
not-
building's
they
on the
are
other side, but I
across the
guess maybe
street.
their land.
Oh, okay.
They go over to the river.
yeah, they, across the street, John.
Okay.
The river is just on the other side of it.
Well, I know Richard Anderson has a fair parcel that's in conservation, I believe.
Maybe the drifters is that sort of little inset one.
Might be.
So the village district, I buffered, I took the New Hampshire DOT center lines from New Hampshire DOT and buffered that 500 feet. That's what you see in orange on that.
Yeah.
For projecting forward, I assumed if it was non-residential now, that it would stay non-residential, be developed to its fullest. I assumed residential land would stay residential. And I looked at it both ways, with undeveloped land being developed in those same proportions versus if all the undeveloped land was commercial, which is a likelier scenario in terms of kind of highest and best use.
What is that?
Tara, the white block that's landlocked, which I think may be FX Lions land, did you count that in as developable? You did. So someday, as if it could get a road through the forest.
It's all done assuming more roads are put in.
I can't imagine National Forest would allow a road through.
But there's a right of way to it now.
Oh, there is?
There is, actually, I looked into this in great detail. He does have a chance of getting a right of way across Prospect Park.
Oh,
There is a precedence there that he
interesting.
possibly could.
Okay.
There's a right of way now.
So this
Where is the, oh, there.
That's
Oh,
a, yeah,
well,
it's a public right.
they legally, before he bought it, tried to get a right of way across Prospect. And they took it to court, there's all kinds of documents on it in the files. And they just, I guess he just dropped it and sold it. And
I'm just trying to figure out where
was,
that is.
about ready to sell it, so he just dropped the court case. But he had a pretty good case to cross Prospect, actually.
And Tara, you're saying that the current ski trail is public access to it?
It's, on your hand, it says a public right of way.
Oh, yeah.
Does the ski trail follow on an old road?
Probably an old logging road.
Yeah, because it goes, where it goes down, it connects with.
That's the Dana Place Trail, right?
All ski trail. And now,
Anyway, it's easy to segregate that out and tell you kind of a with and without.
Yeah. It couldn't fit a whole lot.
Oh, so I can-
I mean, I don't know how big it is,
It's a 100-acre lot.
but, okay.
But it, I imagine it's steep.
I can make that.
Yeah.
So, the rural residential district is very much not orange. We talked at the last meeting about whether to just look at 500 feet into that as commercial or the whole lot, but looking at your zoning again, it provides for being able to develop the whole lot at commercial use if it already is developed for commercial. So that's how I did the calculations. But assume that undeveloped land in the rural residential district would just be residential. You see in the striped blue, the River Conservation Overlay District, that's zone AE from which is the 100-year floodplain. And then I took the list of streams in the ordinance and buffered that at 79 feet. I didn't take all of that out of what's developable because it's really, you let people count it as part of the minimum lot size, it's more like a setback. So, if you look at how that district affects different lots, you see that on some of them it would be easy to get the same amount of houses on there as if that district didn't exist, whereas others it really is kind of in the way. It's between the road and the land and whatnot. So just to have some number to work with, I counted it as affecting the development potential by 50%. Happy to show you what it looked like with a different number, but
That seems pretty reasonable to me.
just for lack of a better approach. So then how we get there is the soil-based lot sizes. So the first little kind of hurdle is that your ordinance references the high-intensity soil maps. High-intensity soil mapping standards went out of use 12 years ago. And it's now site-specific soil mapping standards. That's a different list of soils. And so the mineral lot sizes have been, that's all been rewritten and is in new documents. So I used the new documents because it didn't make a lot of sense to try to, match up the old, out of the soil maps.
Would you just
One of the,
clarify that? In other words, you said the high-intensity soil map.
and
is
I've
what
written that
we-
up for you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Um,
And it was 12 years old.
Yeah,
What do we need to
so I've written up for you,
change to?
and I've given you a table of exactly what I've assigned for minimum lot size to each soil, just so there's no question about, well, what does that mean? So,
Is this something we probably need to look at to change?
and I have that recommendations, yeah.
Oh,
And it would be something that I could, easily help you with, just,
And how different is it?
one of the reasons they did it was because the coding system didn't match the county soil survey maps. Everybody was having their own way of calling the same soil, so, that's what's nice about the new system, is if you're talking about that particular soil on the county, broad scope maps, and it's the same, calling the same thing, that same name, when you do a
Does-
soil map on your property for a subdivision.
Does it take into account the slope?
Well, it still goes into the 6 drainage groups, and then has slope.
Because
Yes.
the ones that we have in our ordinance right now, it has the type of soil, like Lyman or Marlow or Beckett, and then it is, as you get steeper and steeper, it's
Right.
larger and larger minimum lot
Right.
size.
It's doing two things. First, it's grouping them by drainage characteristics, and then it's looking at the slope, and
But-
both systems do that.
Right, your chart here doesn't show that, it just gives a minimum lot size for a
Sure
particular.
it does. If you look at, let me find one.
Okay. Oh, I see.
745E is 99,750 square feet. 745F is so steep, it's not applicable, it doesn't count at all. for-
All right, I see how it works.
So,
Okay, got it.
yeah.
So when
Some
it's
of them-
called site-specific, Tara, is it really site-specific? It's already
Oh,
in
yeah, I
that
mean,
kind of
they're
depth?
still saying that before you apply this information to somebody's subdivision, it needs to be mapped on that property,
Okay.
because the county maps are too generalized. As far as the build-out analysis, chance, when you add it all together, it's still gonna come out about the same as
Yep.
if you looked at it on each property. The problem is, this boundary between the two soils may really be on this property, or it might really be on that
Right.
property. So that's pretty irrelevant to the build-out, but very important to the subdivision. So, yeah, it's a fine system, it still needs mapping on the ground, but, you just need to update some references and things. So I want to use the new ones because they work with the setups that we had, and I'm assuming that would be the direction that you'd be going. Some of the, limitations, when you look at the map and say about that conserved property up to the north, and you see that there's this little white sliver. When they mapped the soils for Jackson, they didn't bother mapping what was in the national forest. But for some reason, they line things up a little bit different than your current tax map contractor does. So there's these slivers really in a lot of places around the edges of town. I don't think it matters to the overall results because it was pretty uniform and all the way around town, but just wanted to point that out that,
Why the slivers?
yeah, why the slivers.
Using a different mapping projection.
Yeah, and they should all be following the right standard, but somebody didn't, so. Some things in the assessors data just didn't link to anything in the tax map, and, some of them I could tell what were condominiums, they were the land that was condominiums. So there was a lot of that, so I treated those as supporting residential development. So that's how I did it.
There are only 217 more units possible in the village district? Is that, reading on page 5?
Right,
Come on.
217 altogether.
Yeah, that isn't a whole lot.
No.
Yeah, really.
And, I mean, that's really what jumped out at me in this analysis was that, you know, the village district doesn't really have a lot of development. The rest of town does. And what does that really, and you see this in kind of this kind of thoughts that I laid out in our recommendations, of what does that mean for the village as the town continues to grow, but most people aren't living in the village? And it didn't have a good way to do the non-residential in square feet, because your zoning talks about gallons per day. It doesn't talk about square feet, it talks about sewage loading. So I did sewage loading, and similarly, you have a lot more potential on the grandfather lots, not in the village district, than you do in the village district. So there's definitely some things to think about as you work on the master plan and to talk with the public about maybe that, you know, fill out, use the community survey that you're talking about and a way to ask some of these questions. Maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe it does.
Tara?
Maybe there's a potential of, maybe it makes sense as 4 zoning districts rather than 2 even. When you look at the map, if I didn't know this was a village district, I might assume that this kind of bigger core area that's seen a lot of subdivision was the village district. And actually, when you look at the tax maps give me an easy way to combine different parts of town. And these all, you know, are labeled village something or other, right? I have actually was playing with it on that. Because it would be, I didn't want to spend time doing it unless it would be helpful to you, but I was just, as our plotter was dying and deciding to make things straight. This is the tax maps, and so if you kind of look at the little map and where there's been a lot of subdivision, it's kind of these village tax maps together with these down on the, is that Bartlett? Boundary.
Yes.
That might be a way to look at this with how much development would be there versus in the rural areas surrounding that kind of part of town that's already seen a lot of development. Or that might make no sense in your thinking, and there might be some other direction that you've thought about, it's been in the commercial district.
Did you make any real correlation between that and topography?
Sorry, can you ask that another way?
And topography, as to, is that the area of town that is less steep than the rest, or is?
I can do a map with slopes and.
I'm just curious as to, because obviously the flat land gets developed first, or more reasonable.
Right, it probably is.
Though there is some.
This isn't a
topography.
ski area.
Yeah.
Right, here and here.
Tara, when you did your, I guess, 217 unit figures for the village district, are you calculating with that there might be, say, apartments above stores and things like that? Or are you talking individual homes, quote unquote?
I looked at how your zoning dealt with that, and it was just a small difference for multifamily.
Okay.
So, I mean, I didn't look at that with that kind of fine,
I'd love to see what the breakdown is between in what we consider the village area, say, maybe up to Eagle Mountain Road or something like that, and then how many units there are in the remaining district above Eagle Mountain Road that's also called Village District, if you see what I mean, going up to the National Forest boundary in the northern part of town. I'm wondering, you know, because when I think of the village, I'm thinking right here in this little,
On the loop up to Eagle
Yeah.
Mountain Road.
and I'm trying to figure how 217 units,
Are they up there?
but
or are
I'm
they
realizing
down
many of them may be up Route 16, and I just, you know, people always say it's undevelopable because this land's so steep and so on.
The river hits one side, that's a you can't develop.
Sorry, what?
Where the river is almost in the road.
Right.
But the other side is.
Yeah,
It's pretty
and,
steep on the other
So I
side.
guess what she's trying to get is,
but somewhere 217 units can fit in. I'm wondering where and
Is
how.
that total of 217,
Total.
counting what's there now?
Right.
Okay, it's not,
Total,
it's not
and-
additional.
Can you
It's
put,
easier, I mean, it's a lot more doable if I can use a tax map boundary.
Sure,
If there's
okay.
a place on this map that.
Great, I'll see if I can get that.
Maybe it's here.
Here's your purple. That's the one that you're,
Here?
Yeah.
So,
these are the edge of the purple one.
so it's here.
or is it possible to put on the map where, you know, like, for each lot, how many units
No.
it could support? Just so we could see where, especially saying where that development is actually occurring, you know, where it's more dense or less
It-
dense.
Well, it's not a lot by lot build-out analysis. I mean, it's chopping it all up into soil-based pieces and then putting it all back together in different.
Mm-hmm.
so these are approximate figures anyway.
Right.
Yeah, because if you go parcel by parcel, you're not gonna get the same number.
Number.
Let me get something really close. I've actually done, to some build-outs, I've had the opportunity to do more than one reading, and the numbers are really close.
Well, so far, I think this could be really helpful.
So would this be helpful as a unit to look at? The development capacity of the, just kind of wondering what you want to see next.
Pretty diverse in there, isn't it? I mean, that whole, that area.
The village at Harwell and the Blag.
If you want to be able to see the growth potential of different parts of town, that's why I brought the tax maps, because that's how I can do the groupings.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Bless you.
each little soil piece has a tax map.
And I've got a question for you. You quickly mentioned that you might want to divide your town into not just a village or a rural residential. What, right, you said that, I think.
You said 4.
You have 4 possibilities. What are the other 2?
When I just glanced at this, I think of the village district you have up Route 16 as being very different than down here.
Oh, yeah.
And this pretty heavily developed area around the village core seems like a transition zone between the village and the rural areas.
I guess what I'm asking you, what
Planner, that's
what-
kind of how I see
What
it.
would you call,
would you
Yeah.
call?
what would you call the different districts?
Yes, what would you call those other 2 districts you were talking
They'd
about?
still be residential. I don't think that we'd try to expand the commercial, although we're going to deal with what's allowed in the rural residential.
Well, you know, one thing I always have trouble with is that we've got these hotels that are non-conforming uses, and maybe we don't want them to be non-conforming uses. I mean, maybe we want to set up some sort of a district where we're saying, sure, Christmas Farm Inn ought to be there, and we ought to be able to have them make an application to do X, Y, or Z, and that could be reasonable. I don't know how other people feel
I
about
was
that.
curious about that when I
But then
looking
if
at
you
this
make
and
a,
reading the zoning, it seemed like some of the really core businesses in town are non-conforming. What
And
does that mean?
like Black Mountain, don't we want Black Mountain to be there and be successful? Do we want to call it a non-conforming use so that they can't do things to improve themselves?
And what would cause a cessation of that grandfather state? In other words,
Well,
if Christmas Farm Inn were shut down for 10 years, could it
Oh,
reopen?
it's,
No.
No,
no, it has to be
there's
done
a,
in 6, is it?
yeah, there's a time limit, I
Yeah.
remember.
Which I think
it has
is an
to
issue.
spruce.
You wouldn't want the Eagle Mountain House to, or the Christmas Farm Inn to shut down for a period of time and then have it no longer.
It's it.
Yeah,
potentially-
I guess
The
the
way
other area
we
I could
barely
see
saved
that-
the Wentworth
I think
Hotel.
that happened to Spruce Mountain. I think it was shut down as
Could be.
an inn or type property long enough that it lost its ability to be.
Mhm.
I could see as kind of business models evolve, there being issues about what consists of continuing the same use. You know, if it's grandfathered and it can be the same use and the zoning says that can be expanded on a property, but they want to add some other
Yeah.
part of the enterprise, that could be, that could be a deal breaker.
Yeah, what if Whitney's Inn wanted to be able to, put in 3 new cottages, or if Black Mountain wanted to be able to offer some summertime thing, or a school, or, we're saying no, 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 no. And maybe, do we want to do that? What happens if Black closes?
Nestlenook came to us a few years back, and they were talking about maybe a sliding park or something like that, and we sat there and didn't give them a no, but we sat around this table and said, well, that becomes what was it? It fell into.
Change of use.
Yeah, but it was,
Water parks?
water parks, it fell into that. And they were afraid, so they couldn't expand their business, which, seemed like a
And maybe
perfect
that should be
fit.
part of our survey questions,
That's a good
we
point.
should be seeking.
And it was also that their lot is partially commercial, but not all of it was.
Right,
Mhm.
And so how to handle that.
yeah. And
Well, Tyrell wanted to open up again.
It reads, the zoning reads to me that they could expand their existing use onto the rest of their lot. I mean, that's how, I'm sure if you got 4 lawyers in a room,
Yeah,
they'll all
you got
be
4
there, but
different-
that's how this planner reads it.
And maybe we don't want it that way, maybe we do, but it's certainly something to be savvy about and figure.
Look at it.
Maybe we
Right.
could look at swapping 16, expanding the district around, what we have as an active commercial district, and then pull back on 16 some and sort of
The
trade.
thing is, so if you make a district, you can't just restrict it to one lot. You would have to make it a whole
A
area.
district.
And that would mean that all of those parcels in there could all be developed as more hotels, whatever. And the question is whether that's
Right, but
something
there's,
that you want.
as far as 16 is concerned, there's, one side that is concerned about losing any commercial land just because we have so little, and it, to some degree is vital to the town to have, an active commercial, active businesses. But then the other side, and I think there's, both sides, have a good point, that the other side is saying this is beautiful land, do we really want it to be developed commercially? And so, why not move that potential commercial development into an area that's less sensitive in terms of being scenic and,
Mhm.
in and of itself, a resource, for the
Well,
town as
definitely is a potential survey question.
Yeah.
I see Betsy busily writing. So good.
Definitely a good survey question.
So, can you give us an idea of what you think a legitimate, a logical name might be for some of our districts, if we were to?
No. First, I would need
That's a
to
good
have
answer.
some conversations with you and maybe the public about what is okay in those districts.
Right, how would you define the district?
What land, I think you need to talk about land use.
What do we want to
Those
see?
are good.
I have a question. I'm relatively inexperienced with this, when we're talking about, you mentioned about how you came up with the numbers, said it was not lot by lot, but by soils. And what's the difference of the two numbers? Not a number, but I'm saying, is there a significant difference if you did a lot by lot analysis versus the soils for reality?
It should come out the same,
Okay.
but take a lot longer to do it lot by lot.
No, I just want to make sure.
It should come out the same.
Okay.
So Terry, not to keep beating on this, but you suggested that we might want to consider additional districts. I assume not just because 4 is a better number than 2. I mean, you must have had some idea as to what types of districts would potentially benefit the town. And or at least what are examples of other types of districts that we might add?
It's not really something that I would make a recommendation about without kind of hearing from the public process.
Well, I guess I'm not asking for a recommendation, I'm just asking
But I don't-
for examples.
I can't answer that. I mean, as a planner, I have conversations with the community and hear what their goals are and the public, and then say, all right, well, what if you did this? Here's a way to get there.
Is there another town in the state that someone similar to us that has additional districts?
Why I said that was it struck me that you have this village district that's here, and it's up Route 16 in a strip development type way. Really different character, and I would expect you to want a really different character in this village area than you would up 16. That there may be businesses that you don't allow yet that with shared accesses and proper setbacks and screening would be okay on Route 16 to add to the tax base. And there also might be areas of town that you don't want developed to the density that the soils allow. That's pretty dense development for these backlands, really. A lot of it. And when you look at the table, it's 1 or 2 acre lots.
Karen, with Scott's question about towns that might be similar, I've looked at your master plan for Easton.
Yeah.
It seems to me that could be a town that's sort of similar in some of its, it's got a big road going through it, and
They have no center.
Really?
I mean, that's where they're not similar. They have no center. You find the town hall because it's after the fire station, and then you're gone from the center again. You
yeah,
don't have a,
I was thinking they had sort of a node.
no, they really don't.
No, okay.
Well, an example I was thinking of, like here, right in the village, we have a center, and it's very much a downtown. And downtowns, when you think about them, you park right in front of the shops. There is no setback. The shops are up against the main street, and we kind of have that here already. I mean, there aren't a lot more properties here in the village itself that there would be setbacks, or because it's pretty much filled up the village at this point. So that's a real downtown in my mind. Whereas up Route 16, what you were saying, yeah, it might be a village district, but maybe you want a setback. Maybe you want to protect it. You don't want it to be a downtown. You don't,
I think it's village.
And
How
so.
is it village?
Well, I'm saying it's commercial.
Just
That's
for
what
sake of
I think I
argument.
said the wrong
Yeah,
word.
right.
I think it's commercial.
That's
It's
where I was
labeled
stuck,
village
is
commercial,
not
even though it-
village.
Yeah, but it's unlike the downtown.
Right.
Yeah, and so maybe that we could distinguish 2 different
So rather than use-based,
commercial
more like
districts.
zoning, restriction-based,
Yeah.
in other words.
Well, I think one thing we gotta realize that this is a historical vestige in that it's, just left over. I think if we went back through all of our zoning ordinance, this may have been something that was created back in the 70s when the zoning was first
Meaning
put
the
in
strip.
place. Yeah, the strip that goes up, because that was probably about the time that you, and I don't know my history that well, but you got all the strip development down in Conway, and that it
Yeah,
may have
it
been the
should
same kind of mentality.
Well, we can
that
look
said-
that up.
Yeah,
One thing I could think
Just
makes
because-
some sense is to have a village commercial district right down here, and to have a village residential that would be the Route 16B loop, where, you know, you might have a little shop or something or other if people were to go, maybe not in the next 20 years. But there used to be a school up there, there used to be, you know, other structures other than the commercial hotels and so on. And certainly there are lots of restaurants and inns and so on. So to some extent, that has a commercial bent to it. And we could label it that and then design how we wanted it to be built if there's future construction there.
And then maybe if you wanted to cut off the district that goes up Route 16, that section of what is called in our zoning ordinance, the village district. That's why we use the term, because that's what's in the zoning ordinance. It may not be accurate on the ground, but just to cut that piece off and put other restrictions on it, you know, like screening and setbacks and so on, so that the people who own land up there would not all of a sudden not be able to use it for commercial ventures. But if they were to use it for commercial venture, then they would have to meet certain restrictions.
Right, and the walkability is one of the things that made me start thinking about that, is that
Yeah.
you want businesses close to the road in the village, you want it walkable and people share parking and whatnot. You don't generally want business close to the road on something like Route 16. You want a setback and screening.
Mhm.
And with the natural limitations there of the steep slope and the river going alongside, that your potential of development is rather limited.
Well, let's be careful, because I can remember, the river is pretty good protection. But there's an Irving station up in, no, it's in Berlin. They went in and blasted out the bank. They just carved out the whole thing, and they set it in there.
Yeah, but you used to have 2 gas stations up 16. We had 5 in this town, believe it.
Mm.
Right where, the sign guy, I can't come up with his name.
Evan,
But right over his back hill there is where, there must have been a gas station there, because there's remains of cars and
that's what they
and
used to
gas
do.
signs, and I pulled out a nice little SO enamel sign out of there. Yeah, but there was a gas station right there, obviously, right on that, left-hand side.
and
Yeah, so if we had, say,
before
4
Freeman's.
districts, if we had, say, residential, commercial, if we had village commercial, village residential, rural residential, and rural commercial, you know, those could be very basic
Yeah.
delineations that we might eventually choose, or something.
Well, definitely food for thought.
Yeah, it is.
So I just touched on a couple of these in the recommendations page. I mentioned already the updating the reference to this. Another thing that I brought up in the last meeting was just awkward is the wording of the River Conservation District boundaries, because when you're reading that section of the ordinance, it says, this district is something like zone A and AE, only you don't have any A. That's like 2 sections down, and it's these other things along the streams, and that's really, I think, could be misleading to somebody. So you expect, if it says this district is this, you expect that to be the whole of it, not to have to read on and find, what,
That we have a flood, you mean because we have that District 12 that's
well, and
flood?
then you get to the District 12, and there's this whole other set of regs about the floodplain. So I'm just suggesting to kind of overhaul those up. Again, just mentioned about the village district, and also, I think there's questions about density in here, and to talk about as part of the master plan update of whether people want the entire town developed in 1 or 2 acre lots, or whether some lower density from the village is something to think about.
Well, we have the problem with flood potential in the village.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty huge, isn't it? Am I out to lunch?
Just have to go down after Irene, you'll see it.
Right, it's not, not so much somewhere that you want to encourage new growth, so I think, I think this gives you some, especially if you give me some pieces to divide it up to look at, it gives you some way to look at where you have development potential. Not so much in the village as we saw in the 217 dwelling units and
Do you have a way of
smaller amount of,
separating out that 217 as to how many are existing? And
I probably can do that.
The 217 is total,
I mean, I feel that just looking at your tax map.
That's the total for that ground area.
right, but it's existing plus
But
potential.
we have so many existing, so that would come on for that.
What is the growth potential?
Mm.
I can look through your tax data for that.
Whether that was a simple question to ask the committee.
It should be, let's say it should be. It should just be a matter of looking at the assessor's data.
Yeah.
Because they have the zoning there too.
And it probably, if it is somewhat easy to do the same thing for this one district which you felt is more developed than the rest. And that, what's the build-up potential of that? Because if you look at it, there's a lot of little lots right in there.
Right.
And the rest, beyond that, these are all very large parcels. And to develop those, you'd have to have a whole road system that goes in.
Right, and to account for that, I took out a percentage. We've done a sampling of subdivisions in different towns with different zoning density, and 18% was an average of the amount of land that doesn't end up being in lots with the size lots that you get through the soil-based density, so I took out 18%. So that's accounted for in these big lots already.
On page 5, is this a typo? It says county coil survey? Is it supposed to be soil?
I would imagine it's a typo.
Okay, I should know if that was a different survey.
And there isn't, is there any existing current mapping that would show existing residences? Like some topo mapping does that, but just as a way of seeing where we have development.
Well, actually, I can do a cleaner version of this map that I brought last time, but I was able, just using your assessor's data, to put, on this map, the little black dots mean there's a building on the parcel,
Okay.
according to your assessor's data. So I can do a cleaner version of this, that
It just
puts
would
that
kind
out.
of, I think, show, we're saying that, what was it, 20-something hundred potential residences could go into Jackson, right? I don't know what that number was, but to see where they would go.
Well,
By looking at where they already are.
I don't think you can do that, because some of these really large lots might only have one right now, but have a lot of subdivision potential.
Right, I guess looking at, if it showed residences, you could see sort of, okay, this area is very dense, so there's going to be less development right in this part of town, but this area over here is very sparse in terms of residences. So that's where we know that new residences would likely go or could go. It just would map out where that development would happen in town.
I think your best next glimpse at that is looking at the lot lines right now. You know, if you, in an area like this versus like this, obviously a lot of development's gonna go to here. But
Right,
you
just
can't
that-
get at the amount from where there's already a building, because there's already buildings on these lots, but there's a lot of subdivision potential.
And also it'd be limited, you've got several soils that show that you can't use that, and it wasn't used. Now that would just, can you get that as a GIS layer? and put it
Yeah,
on
I can
top?
do that and the slopes.
Right, because it's
Yeah.
those areas, because we know that the forest land is not part of it. And then we know that there's a lot of areas that are steep slopes or soils, the wetlands, which is not as prevalent, but yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
So that would then give us even more precise where this would be developed.
It'll be a little misleading to map that with parcel lines because they're done at very different scales. So you all have to promise not to hold it against anyone whose parcel it looks like it's on.
But, it'll end up being pixelated? Or-
Well, the parcels are mapped at a much more accurate scale
Right.
than the soils. The soils are done at probably 1 to 20,000 photographs. So it could look like it's on this person's land and really be on that person's land. But in terms of what part of town has
Right.
that lot,
It'll give us a
Right.
good gross
right,
look at it.
yeah.
Let me get that straight. So you're talking about adding the slopes, adding the steep slope or the gradations or whatever to that? The
I'll
topos?
map the soil information in some way that gives you some feel for development potential.
Okay. Another question I have, sometimes when you see a build-out analysis, they do it, what you can expect in 10 years and what in 30 years and so on.
There's no way.
Is there any differentiation that you're figuring on?
You know, we paid to have population projections done because OU wasn't doing them. And the thing that I handed out references what we did. I mean, I can tell you that the estimate is 15% growth in the next 30 years in Carroll County. Past that,
No.
who would claim to know?
I can't imagine how people could figure, in this part of town, you're going to get 20% more than in that
Yeah,
part of
no.
town.
You couldn't.
I don't think it would be me.
But
And
do
also
you,
because
would
it
you,
depends on the schemes that
Yeah.
come forward, because I'm thinking, the time will come when somebody will build the bridge that goes across the river and hits the other side of the river and develops that. And the time will come when somebody will take it out of current use and divide it up into lots and put in a town spec road. I mean, those things will probably come to pass because at some
You
point,
can't predict.
right, and you can't, there's no way.
Yeah, and there are other people who sit on 100 acres for their lifetime, and,
Generation.
and pass it down, so you don't, they may put it in conservation at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
The growth trend from the handout, I guess last time you heard there, that shows Jackson remaining stable through 2040.
It's beyond me.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it won't be gone.
Yeah, when they parsed out how much of Carroll County's growth was in Jackson, it didn't show Jackson growing at 15%.
and
But I don't feel like that part of their projection was as meaningful. And it's looking at what percentage of the growth of the county you had in the last 20 years
But just in
and
looking,
holding that steady for the next 30, but
but in looking at this graph, it's fairly steep growth, you know, from 60 to 2000, up to 1995. And then, you know, flattened out since then, but, you know, I guess we're thinking of the rationale.
and it's showing pretty flat for the next 30, yeah.
But is there a reason why that's, is expected to remain flat as opposed to either go back up or?
Again, that's just looking at,
Yes.
that's looking at your share of the county's growth for the last 20 years. And
I'm assuming that it's not gonna change a lot.
Right, and there's a
Even-
lot of assumptions in there. The
Even
county
though-
projections are done based on looking at, for each age group, how many are having children, how many are dying, how many are moving in, how many are leaving. So that's how they do the county, but then they decide how to divide the county up. And they looked at your past growth rate.
Right, I mean, I guess what strikes me here is that if you go back 20 years just in Jackson, and then, you know, continue that trend, you know, even though it did flatten out, the overall trend would, you know, still be up as opposed to down.
There are,
Because there's 10 years of.
all of the, I would say, I mean, we've talked with a lot of demographers and economists in the past year as we're getting ready to update our regional plan, and they all feel we're in for a flat period. And, you know, all saying that our New Hampshire's fast growth years are coming. And for now.
Tara, can you tell us about your Appendix B, the design flows?
Because all I could give you for the commercial was the loading potential. I don't really have a way to put that into square feet. I gave you the table from the DES regulations. That's what Appendix B is, just the DES regulations for design flow, so that you could say, well, you know, what was the number? So how did you use it? I was able to use the soils to estimate that loading capacity of the village district is 194, almost 195,000 gallons a day. Well, what is that in terms of usage? This just gives you a way to think about that.
What is a GPD?
Gallon per day.
Okay.
And that's how your zoning regulates
Right.
commercial. Looking at the soils and regulating gallons per day. You
Yeah.
don't manage square feet or traffic per day or employees or impervious. All you manage is wastewater water.
And more commonly, towns do it by square footage or something like that?
Or footage or lot coverage. Impervious surface. And that may be, I mean, that would be a way to talk with the public about if you're gonna do some public meetings or what kinds of land uses are okay. You may find it's not so much the kinds of land uses that people care about in different parts of town, but certain things about those land uses that make them okay in different parts of town or compatible with residential areas. It may be how much traffic, lighting, employees, deliveries. Because you almost have, it's almost more of a performance zoning when you talk about the gallons per day, but you're only looking at one pretty narrow piece of the. So, do we want to talk again before we talk about the public presentation?
Yeah, we have another meeting in 3 weeks. So I would think that in the meantime, we can form up our questions and ideas, like if there is a zoning designation that we could create, the upper Route 16 commercial zone or something like that. I think that we need that time to, get our thoughts together. And then, I guess, talk with you again, certainly talk with you again.
Well, I can come to that and I'll look at my calendar, but,
You feel better by then?
I feel a lot better than last week.
Okay.
I was actually in bed almost in bed, kind of 5 days, just.
That's not nice.
So I can do these, you'll read it, your job will be to read it. And mine will be to do these 4 things that we talked
Yeah.
about.
Does that sound good? Get back together and I
So
think.
Kara, the
then-
4 things you're going to do, let me make sure that I know.
I'm not volunteering anything.
I'm going to,
I did that last time.
look at the commercial, the village district potential, roughly below Eagle Mountain Road, based on the tax maps.
Mhm.
See if I can tell how many units are now in the village district. This is pink, I think. Look at this kind of already heavily developed part of town versus the rest.
And separate that out as to what's there versus the potential.
And with
If that's fairly,
With the soil types that you used, does it change the minimum lot size?
We can designate
I'm saying what
Lot
she
size.
used, I'm saying, does that impact,
She's
is that a different calculation than what we're using?
just saying
It's
for
gonna be very
looking down
similar.
the road.
It should be similar.
But we can have the more stringent.
I'm saying if she's
regulation.
saying it's X and we're saying it's Y, then we have to, she's saying you can develop 300 lots using this, and we're saying we can develop 200 using ours.
So-
There's a discrepancy.
It's the same organization that made the standards for each. I'm guessing that wouldn't be true.
Well, that's why I'm
The
asking.
standards are pretty similar because they're
Right.
based on slope and drainage and all
Right,
that sort of thing.
it's just a
So-
modernizing of the
It's
Yeah.
just
scoring
a
system.
different wording for the
I'm just
system.
asking so I know, so I
Yeah.
can sleep tonight.
No, far less. Kara, I had asked if you had the ability of pulling out how many small lots, meaning, that were non-conforming or almost non-buildable that exist. Was that something you could do or not?
1 second. The 4th thing was
Okay,
to
sorry.
do a map of the areas where the soils indicate it's not
Yes.
really developable. You asked for 2 things.
Yeah.
One was home values, in some categories, and I did do that. I apologize that it did not come to me.
Oh,
That, not so easy,
okay.
because that would be, I thought about that, and it kind of would be going back and sorting it by parcel and adding each up individually for,
Which is, a lot of work.
yeah.
That's not just a push of the button.
None of it's a push to button. None of it's that, but some is a couple hours versus maybe being.
Yeah, well, we don't want to do that, do you?
So where you're going to figure out what units are existing now versus what number could be in the future, is that just for the village district, or are you going to do that townwide?
I was gonna do it for the village district, and then for this developed area
Okay,
versus the rest of town.
did you ask the slopes? She got to that, yeah. she got
Okay, everybody happy?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming out tonight.
So thank you for coming out a second time, and apologize for making everyone come out in the snow.
It's easier for us than it is for you guys.
We're a little closer.
questions or concerns between now? When's the next time to do it?
What is, let's see,
Maybe not.
February,
You do it.
Okay, she handed me that.
We thought it was yours.
Yeah, I did. Sorry.
GPFs.
Brought my pen. It's like 100 miles.
I'll get it out to you.
100 miles away as far as I'm concerned.
So we're looking at the second Thursday,
Yeah,
yeah, good.
they look it, don't they?
See y'all later.
Okay.
Take care, John.
So my question, Dick, is if we have any concerns for her, do we tell them to you and then you relay them to her
You'll tell me on the 13th.
on the 13th?
So that won't be the public hearing about it, that'll just be,
no, I thought we needed one more meeting
okay.
of us getting together before we got to the public. I want, well, this is good, and it was a good conversation, but I need some time to digest.
Yeah, I think we want to think about what questions you want to ask the public using the information.
You say to the agency.
We had some customers that came
And all that.
Jerry Campbell.
These new volumes for.
Well, we have one, and I don't know what other groups want them. I'm gonna give it to the office, because it really works for them. And I grabbed one, if anybody needs it, but if we don't have enough, I'll make sure we get the rest of them.
Yeah, okay.
He says,
Good night.
Let's see, still here.